to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thanks. I'd like to welcome everyone joining us in person here this evening and anyone joining remotely from home. The board held an executive session on June 13th and 15th regarding personnel, and prior to this meeting regarding safety, personnel, and legal case number 4:22-CV-01335-NWB. Board members, with the agenda before you, are there any changes? Excellent. That's what I like to hear. First up, we're going to start with communications. We have one retirement announcement this evening. Patricia. Oh, sorry. Thank you. Can I have the secretary have a roll call of board members first? Thank you. You're good.
Dr. Anderson.
Here.
Dr. Nader.
Here.
Ms. Brick.
Here.
Dr. Crevecourt.
Yeah.
Ms. Huff.
Here.
Mr. Colby.
Here.
Dr. Miller.
Here.
Thank you.
All right. That's it?
Yep.
Thank you very much. Sorry for neglecting that. So we'll try one more time. Communications. We have a retirement this evening to announce. That's Patricia Fry. She'll be retiring this month after 29 years in the district. Starting on November 4th, 1997, Patricia was an instructional paraprofessional at Mount Nittany Middle School until 2013, when she moved to be a guidance and clerical paraprofessional also at Mount Nittany Middle School. In 2020, she switched schools and became a clerical paraprofessional at Mount Nittany Elementary. That lasted 1 year, and then she became the Mount Nittany Elementary Attendance Secretary until announcing her retirement this month. Mount Nittany Elementary School Principal Beth Solinsky commended Patricia on her outstanding service to the district, saying, "During the 29 years of dedicated service, Patty's kindness, generosity, and unwavering support touched countless lives. Her gift for serving others, whether through a listening ear or her unforgettable meals and treats, has left a lasting mark on our hearts and our community. She will be deeply missed and forever appreciated." The board thanks Patricia for her service and also wishes her the best in retirement. Following the resignation of my board of directors colleague Dan Colby, which is effective June 18th, the district is now requesting applications from all qualified and interested applicants for the vacant seat. Well, the soon-to-be vacant seat. Interested individuals should submit a brief resume and cover letter, including background, qualifications, and statement of interest in and commitment to serving the Board of School Directors. The successful applicant will be appointed to serve until the next municipal election in November 2025. Materials are now being accepted and are due no later than Thursday, June 26th, 2025 at 4 p.m. The screening and selection process will be conducted in public at a meeting on Tuesday, July 1st at 7 p.m. here in Panorama Village Boardroom. If interested, please submit materials to Board Secretary Lynn Tressler, and the process of that July 1st meeting is a topic of discussion later this evening. And with that, I'd like to invite Dr. Bucher to share some district news.
Thank you. The State College Area School District is looking to fill numerous open positions as we prepare for the next school year. If you have a high school diploma and a desire to work in the education field, we are looking for you. All members of the community are invited to attend our open job fair on June 26. We are seeking paraprofessionals, bus drivers, substitute teachers, and custodians. Please bring your resume and be ready to be interviewed and possibly hired on the spot. The support staff job fair will be held on Thursday, the 26th of June from 8:30 a.m. until 3:30 p.m. here at Panorama Village Administrative Center. Please come at any time throughout the day. At the fair, you will be introduced to administrators and have the opportunity to ask questions and learn about all the available job opportunities that we have to offer. Before I close my remarks, I would like to take a moment to acknowledge that this is Dan Colby's last meeting with us. As he concludes his time on the school board, I'd like to recognize his service and time and dedication to the district. Dan's involvement has demonstrated a clear commitment to engaging in the work of public education, and his contributions to our students, staff, and school have been appreciated. We thank him for his service and wish him all the best in his future endeavors. Thank you, Dan.
Thank you, Dr. Bucher. I'd like to now call on Angel Henward for an update of student initiatives.
State College Little Lions FFA members participated in the 96th Pennsylvania FFA State Convention on Penn State University Park campus last week. Our representatives competed against students from across Pennsylvania in their respective contests in hopes of representing Pennsylvania at the National FFA Convention. Katie Coopy earned 5th place in livestock evaluation, and she was also recognized as the winner in the proficiency area of fruit and nut production for her Supervised Agriculture Experience SAE project that focuses on her work at Way Fruit Farm. Katie will represent Pennsylvania in the area of fruit and nut production at the National FFA Convention in October. Jaylene Everhart was elected as the 2025 to 2026 Pennsylvania FFA State Chaplain. Jaylene will travel throughout Pennsylvania as a state officer over the next year, serving Pennsylvania FFA, promoting FFA and agriculture education, and advocating for the agricultural field. We are proud of the accomplishments of our FFA members and the hard work and dedication that they have devoted to their contests. Congratulations to all.
Indeed. Thank you. Jackie, do you have any legislative matters to share this evening?
So work at the state level continues on the budget. The main education piece is still HB 1500, which is seeking to change cyber charter reform. It passed the House and is now in the Senate. So generally, we're working to educate and pressure senators to approve that bill. At the federal level, we're still working on the BBB. And the piece in there that I have been talking about, ECHA, has a new name. It's now called the Qualified Elementary and Secondary Education Scholarship. And so I actually have a meeting with one of Senator Fetterman's staffers to discuss that next week. So I'll let you know how that goes.
Great. Region Council of Governments Liaison, Peter's not here. Gretchen, do you have an update?
I do not.
Okay. All right, then we now have time for public comment. Each individual will be allotted up to 3 minutes for items related to board business that are not a consent or action item this evening. For those items, public comment is held just prior to voting on those items. Do we have anyone here in person that's interested in making a public comment? Okay, anyone online? And we had no previous signups, correct? Okay, all right. Well, then with that, we're going to move on to our consent agenda. This includes several items we address in a single motion for approval. To facilitate any questions, we're going to go through each category individually. Board members, if you have a question, please raise your hand. Approval of the minutes, I know we had a brief correction already made to that. Are there any additional? Okay. Operations, we have a number of routine food approvals for our food services department, some transportation routine approvals, a number of annual approvals that we often have, as well as physical plant. Any questions on any of these items? Yeah, Carleen.
I do. I have an A. It was just a comment. That's what you're up to, right?
Which one?
Consent agenda for the finance. A.
For operations? Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know if anybody. It's just that I was looking at the bidding. Is that
Sure. For which one?
for the dairy?
Uh-huh.
And my question was that does the other companies, the Youth Food and the Valley Farms, do they get to bid again for the current, or we just use the price that they had last year to make a determination?
Sorry, give me 1 second to refer. And I think Joe's going to join us too.
Good evening. We did a bid last year in July 24, and at this point, rather than doing a full bid, we received an extension offer with regards to that bid. So we had an initial bid with 2 annual extensions. Based upon the price that Gallagher came back with, it was deemed most appropriate to exercise the extension rather than going through the full bid process.
Okay, so that was basically my question. So we don't ask the other to bid again to see?
No.
We just figured that we'll just, because their prices were low enough last year.
That's correct. And if the prices would not have come back, there would have been a large increase, and we would have had the option not to extend and to go out for the full bid process again.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
For B, for the bread extension, I think it's a similar thing. And I agree that even though the price for the used food was lower, you had said that it's because of storage space, because it's frozen. And I agree with that, if you don't have any addition. The thing that got to me, and I circled it, because I was kind of, it's the quality. You said that it was better. Why? I freeze on my bread all the time. I just,
Yes. And from that one, that would have come from Megan Shaper, and, within this, I can't really, the quality of bread is not really something that is in my
I
wheelhouse.
was just wondering how that determination was made, because the storage part was good enough for
And
me.
that would have been, with Megan involved in that, so she would be able to speak to that.
Okay, that's it,
So
thank
as
you.
someone who eats the Angelo Pacifico and Sons bread on the regular, it's very good. So I'll just throw that out there.
Thank you.
I do think too, the staff tend to observe trends of students' selection and whether they're picking things oftentimes, as I know part of, Megan has mentioned in the past, has been one of her cues as to different things. Those people spend all day in the kitchen, so I think they're pretty.
I think they figure out how much food actually gets eaten, how much gets thrown away.
Yes, they
I've heard her talk about this. I've actually had her in my classes before talking about how they go through picking what to serve, and I think it is mostly observational, but I think it's pretty good. So
Yeah. Yeah, they notice what kids throw out on the regular basis.
And Pacifico is also based in Altoona, so it's a
It's a
local
local.
food vendor.
That's good to know too. All right, any other items in finance operations section? Sure.
It's on all of these things that I thought was very impressive. The routine approval and everything that you guys have to do. I was very impressed by that. And just glancing at it, I was just looking at the two tree companies, and I was wondering why we have two tree companies. But then I think it's because one is for emergencies, like if there's a tree down, because I was looking at the prices and why they differ, and one is like maintenance for all the trees in the property. Is that correct?
For the most part, yes. We like to because there are times when we need a tree addressed and one company is too busy to get to it right away, so we have that other option then to go to if need be.
Okay, because I was, like I said, I was looking at the 15,000 versus 25,000, and that
Yeah, so
just was my
the
attention.
one, I think it's Cleaver's, when we get prices from a lot of different ones, and traditionally Cleaver's comes in lower, so we'd like to use them as much as we can. However, there are times when they're just slam busy, especially when there's storms.
Yeah.
And we need to go out somewhere else, so.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, all right. That takes care of finance personnel operations items. We have instructional programs. There's a agreement with Mifflin County School District where, so we provide Title I services for their students who are in private schools here locally. This is a pretty routine situation. Any questions or problems with that one? And then we have policies, a number of policies that we saw at a previous meeting. I know board members received an email. There was two small adjustments to policy 702 gifts, grants, and donations. Just some redundancy corrections, so I'll just call your attention to that modification if you didn't catch it. But otherwise, they are the same as when we previously discussed them. Any questions on those? Great. Then with that, I will welcome a motion for approval of the consent agenda, items 6 through 9.
Have so moved.
Colby, second.
Okay, that's been moved to second. Any last minute questions that you didn't think of? Any public comment on this item? All right, board members in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, the consent agenda is passed. We're going to move on to action items this evening. First up, we have agenda item 10A, a motion to approve an amendment to the UPMC Behavioral Health Services Agreement. This is shown in attachment 10A.
Have so moved.
Okay, that's been moved and seconded. So this is related to the intensive outpatient program that Stephanie Beaver shared with us at the last meeting to make those adjustments to our, is it? Oh, it's not.
It says
Oh, it's the
Hearts.
Hearts. I'm sorry. I apologize. We were just talking about it earlier and it's stuck in my head. So, yeah, so it's an adjustment to the Hearts agreement. Close, same group. So, other questions on this item? Okay. Any public comment? Okay, board members in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that item is passed. We're going to move on to information items at this time. We have a special guest with us this evening. Cindy Hahn is the Executive Director at CNET, and she's going to be providing us with an update of their annual report. Thanks so much, Cindy. It's good to see you.
Thank you. Hi.
We appreciate all your work, and we want to also give a special shout out to Abby, who's with us for every board meeting. Thanks, Abby.
Indeed. She is every board meeting.
She's a good helper and keeps us on task.
Yes. I put at your place settings tonight the annual report. You will want to take a look at that. You maybe see some pictures of people that you know. So enjoy that in your free time. Just some highlights of last year. We produced 527 programs with a staff of 7 people. Quite a lot for a very small station. Our membership increased to 17 members with the addition of CATA. And we began the closed captioning initiative in February of 2024. The district does participate in that. All of the online programs are closed captioned, and we charge a fee of $17 per hour for that service. In terms of your programming, last year there were 23 school board meetings and then a wide variety of sports and concerts. What used to be called Straight Talk, real conversations for people who care about kids, 3 football games, and of course, last year's commencement. In addition, the agendas for school board meetings are placed on the Channel 98 bulletin board. There were 32 messages in 2024. And when you add it all up, the district sponsored right around 7.3% of all of our programming by all of our members, just down slightly from 2023. And this is what your programming over the past 5 years looks like. There was a large drop-off between 21 and 22 that you see. I looked into that a little bit, and primarily it has to do with fewer straight talks. There were some soccer games that we were able to do in 21, but not 22. 3 less board meetings. So a variety of things contributed to that, not all in one thing. The funding formula, the reason that 5-year period of time is important is that our funding is determined by the 5-year block of time. So your dues every year are determined by a 5-year period preceding that year. So the dues you're paying this year were determined by your programming between 2019 and 2023. Next year will be 2020 to 2024, and so on. So during the 2020 to 2024 years, you sponsored 7.9% of all of the programming by all of our members. Again, slightly down, but not much. Your programming is fairly consistent. And this graph shows you all of the member organizations with the district there. The borough does the most use of our services, as has been from the beginning, with Center County government in second place. I wanted to just remind your viewers, they can find your meetings on Channel 98 at the various times. Monday at 7 o'clock, of course, live. Wednesday at 3, Thursdays at 7 a.m., Friday at 11 a.m., and Saturday at 9 a.m. and 8 p.m. The programs are on demand at cnet1.org. They are all chaptered by agenda item and closed caption. We are also on the Roku, Apple TV, and Fire TV streaming apps. And we have created video tutorials that show you exactly how to find our programming on those platforms. I wanted to share this with you. I'm unable to give you any information about cable viewers, but I can give you information about your views online. So between January of 24 and April of 25, 122.4 where there was the average number of views on cnet1.org, another 139.6 on YouTube, for a total of about 262 views per meeting. I did want to touch on the candidate interviews. I believe you all have participated in them. We invite all the candidates on the ballot for federal, county, state, and our member municipalities and school districts. They are conducted by local journalists and televised on the cable channels and on cnet1.org. And finally, just to remind you, our mission is public information, and we also hope to counter misinformation that sometimes is out there, promote public engagement and transparency, and to make the facts available by providing a recording of proceedings so that the public can see really exactly what transpired. And I think that's it.
Cindy, can you just, for the public, remind them how far back the website goes? Is it 1 year only, and beyond that they would have to make a request?
Well, so good question. Recently we have purchased additional storage, so that time period of 12 months that they were kept online is now about 17 to 18 months.
Okay.
And we'll be working up to keeping everything online for 2 years.
That's great to hear.
Yeah, so it is getting a longer time. Our things are kept on the website. If people want to access a meeting that is 10, 15 years old, they would simply call us and they can get a DVD or a digital download
Great.
of the meeting.
That's helpful. Just thought it was worth pointing out since, well, some of our projects wind up spanning a little bit more
Yeah.
than a year, and so sometimes when people want to know about the beginning, sometimes it's a little longer. So that's really helpful to have spelled out. Great. Well, we appreciate all that you do. I think it's a really important, valuable service. I know certainly as a board member, I've occasionally gone back to look at a previous meeting to make sure that my memory is accurate. So we really value having access to those recordings.
I'm so glad, and we appreciate, your sewer support. The district has been a member of CNET since the very beginning, so we appreciate all of that support.
And certainly, I know many, many families were very grateful on commencement that they had the option to have mobility challenge family members or others be able to watch it on there. I know that's a really valuable service for our families, so we appreciate that. Any questions from board members for Cindy? It's always fairly complete when you come, so you rarely get any questions, but I thank you so much for making time for us tonight. It's good to see you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
All right, we're gonna move on to district-wide facility master plan update and Park Forest Middle School update. So Mike Fisher is gonna be joined by Jeff Straub from Crabtree to give us some information on these two projects.
So, what we have for you today is put together just a kind of a high-level presentation, kind of outlining the sites, and really it's more of a to spur discussion. If we have questions or want to discuss anything, we provided, like I said, the infrastructure assessment way ahead of time, along with the draft of the playgrounds. This isn't going to address the playgrounds that much, but if we want to get into it, we certainly can. And then I think to kind of highlight this, kind of where we're at is the infrastructure assessment is pretty well complete. Playgrounds are about 95%. I should note that the playgrounds are our current facilities and don't yet take into account if we have new playgrounds planned, elsewhere. It's on our radar, but we kind of wanted to wait until the athletic piece of it was done because it's really a matter of space allocation. So we'll roll that in, once kind of the athletics piece of it's done. And then, as well, we're working with a third party for the greenhouse gas inventory. We have one piece left to do, is transportation. We're still trying to get some data. Some of that data is kind of tough to get, we have to dig a little deep. So, but we're working on that, and we hope to have a draft report by the end of this month or early July for that greenhouse gas inventory. So, really for tonight, as we kind of go through this, we really wanted to spur conversation or questions you may have, and we'll just see where the conversation takes us. So.
Sounds good.
Is that on? Okay. Hi, everybody. As Mike said, we had distributed to the board the narratives for the overall assessments of the facilities And quite frankly, it's a lot of information. There's roughly 206 pages for the narratives, then along with the cost estimates and floor plans. So we're not going to go through all of that this evening. So we'll be here
We
for
can if
quite a
you'd
long
like.
time. So what we're going to more hit is some high notes, but then we also have reference documents that, for instance, both me and Mike can jump to the cost estimates and discuss some of that. And probably the important takeaway here is it's setting up a framework for Mike and his team, along with Randy's office, of how do you budget and plan for maintaining your facilities over, most notably, the next 10 years. And right now, for instance, with your elementary schools, we'll talk about it a little bit this evening, you've got roughly 3 elementary schools that are going to need some substantial work because they're approaching the 20, 25 years of life in those buildings. You have 2 elementary schools that, sorry, I'm getting some feedback, that were built about 10 or 15 years ago. So they're starting to also approach some work that needs to occur and be planned for, and then obviously your most recent elementary schools that are really just some minimal work that needs to occur at each of those buildings. As far as the assessments with the roughly 200 pages, each report is typically about 15 to 20 pages in length. And really we were looking holistically at the building for both site, architectural envelope, interior finishes, mechanical, electrical, and plumbing systems, both with architectural consultants as well as the mechanical, electrical, and plumbing consultants that have been working through the district or working for the district. So in the PowerPoint that we provided, generally we have, this is some excerpts from the reports of just both the photo surveys as well as the narratives of all the systems, and again, looking holistically throughout the buildings. Just moving, I'm going to sort of generally move through the different elementary schools as far as the scope of services, but starting with Easterly, Park Forest, and Grays Woods. These would be the 3 elementary schools that would have the most work moving forward in the district. And roughly what we're looking at, for instance, Grays Wood, about $5.8 million, Easterly, about $5.5 million, and Park Forest, about $10 million that needs to be planned for in the coming 5 years. And that's typically, and Mike, don't hesitate to jump in, but what we're looking at is generally finish upgrades, so flooring, ceilings, overall finishes, as well as maintaining the envelopes of the buildings in those cases, as well as a lot of the systems throughout each of those buildings.
So these 3 elementaries are unique in that they pose somewhat of a challenge because the HVAC equipment is integrated within the classrooms in these buildings, along with the casework, and everything's kind of built in, right? And we're getting to that point where, the flooring, the ceiling grid, paints, the casework, the univents, so the mechanical equipment within the room are really getting to that kind of end of life, right? And, it's a challenge to try to, sometimes to renovate this type of stuff, to try to get it all done within our summer months, and how do we kind of stage it, right? Do we do classrooms and do mechanical and finishes, or just mechanical one year and then finishes the next, and then move into the corridor? So those are things that we're kind of, having internal discussions, how do we, pull this off in the window that we have over the summer, so that when kids come back, it's seamless, right? So, but those 3 schools, like I said, are unique, and the HVAC is, like I said, it's the univents are in the classrooms, and they are probably our kind of bottleneck, right? Because they have a lifespan, and we're approaching that. So, if you replace that, and then you then have to replace the casework because it doesn't fit, so it's, like I said, it's a lot of moving parts to those 3 schools in particular, from this kind of holistic, interior remodel. So.
Moving beyond those three buildings, the next is Ferguson Township and Mount Nittany Elementary School. And for those schools, generally, they're completed in 2012, so you're right around 13 years right now. The largest components for those two buildings that the district needs to plan for is replacement of the heat pumps throughout the buildings, which roughly is about $750,000 per building. And also there's some lighting upgrades, essentially upgrading to LED throughout the facilities. I would say of those two buildings, that's the lion's share of work, as well as some landscaping and hardscaping work that needs to occur with those buildings. So again, those two, it's more of maintaining what the investment that was put into them about 13 years ago. And then the last is moving to Coral Street, Spring Creek, and Radio Park. And that is more of there's some minimal, for instance, hardscape improvements of resealing parking throughout the facility, and then also just a long-range allowance of interior finishes of about $500,000 per building. That would not necessarily occur anytime in the near future, but should be planned out roughly in about an 8 to 9 year time frame from now. Okay. I'm going to jump forward in the PowerPoint because really a lot of these slides are more for reference purposes if we get into discussion for questions. My cursor's not working. So this is the sort of the overall totals, and a lot of discussion then has been with Mike and his team about how do we spread that over a time period, so that you're not hitting all these costs at one time. For instance, projecting about $3 million worth of work next year, but then there may be some years that really 10 million, 9.2 million, 13 million, some sort of large scope that needs to occur projected over the coming years. So what we were trying to do was set up Easterly, then Grays Wood, and then finally Park Forest that would occur over roughly about the next 5 to 6 years. And you can see that up on the screen, sort of highlighted in the yellow for the cost impact. And then also trying to mix in, you'll see up on the screen in the blue, sort of highlighting Ferguson Township, as well as Mount Nittany, for instance, dealing with some of those infrastructure for the heat pumps, as an example. Heat pumps, as an example, or typically have a lifespan of 17 to 20 years. So with the buildings being 13 years, it's going to be a large cost that the district just needs to be prepared for, so that you don't start having heat pumps fail and you're not planning for that cost across the board. The opposite is the district can intermittently deal with the heat pumps as they occur. It's just going to become more of a maintenance concern for the district of routinely having to replace those versus do you plan for sort of a large project to deal with them all at one time for the building.
I mean, keep in mind, this is kind of ideal, right? We're hitting end of useful life, and we're not just taking a useful life across the board, whereas a heat pump's 20 years and it's okay, that's it. We took a look at every single system, and not all systems are created equal as far as where they sit. For example, we have air handlers. Some air handlers are in penthouses inside, which are in much better shape than the ones that are outside, for example, right? So that's all taken into consideration. And this is kind of an ideal scenario, right? To where, okay, we should plan to replace this. It doesn't mean we have to, right? We can always limp it by. So there are things we can do, so I don't want the sticker shock here, right? And it doesn't mean, like I said, and some of this stuff's more aesthetics, right? So that we can limp by, and it'll be up to the board on how we kind of address that. And as we go through, I think I put in the memo, once we get athletics done, I'm going to roll this into our own 10-year capital plan, which I had presented 2 years ago. I think I put one together, and then we'll present options, right? And we'll kind of prioritize and we'll work together and put a plan together to move forward.
I think Mike hit it best. This is an optimal scenario if you would fix everything in every building, and no district would ever do that. But it's about putting this framework together so that the district is aware of the concerns and sort of has that plan. And then you periodically update it every few years and has the flooring, for instance, at Park Forest held up. Does it really need to be replaced in a couple years, or do you push that out further because it's continuing to hold itself? Or is there a mechanical system that's, even though it's at the end of its projected warranty life, it may have another 5 or 10 years left in it? But the larger concern is if you don't have that identified and then all of a sudden something breaks down and you weren't watching it, becomes the concern.
Right. And well, we've learned a little bit that, not surprisingly, the cost of things continue to escalate. And so when you talked about the heat pumps and is it all at once or piecemeal, I think a lot of it depends on what also is happening in the market, the availability of the equipment, things like that. I know you take all those things into account as well, Mike, so there's a lot of factors at play.
And the district's in a position now, I think, that wasn't necessarily in the past. For instance, when we did the high school project, essentially everything was failing in the high school project. It had gone substantially beyond its lifespan. Where now, I think we've said it past meetings, the district's really in more of an optimal scenario of generally all your buildings have been dealt with, short of Park Forest, in recent history, and now it's just about creating a plan for the future. So
That's the goal. Yeah, Garen?
My light doesn't work. I have to see. Oh, we're good. I had kind of two questions. One having to do with the elementary schools in particular. I know that we have talked about projected enrollments within those and the kind of the changing dynamics based on our catchment area. I don't know exactly what we call them. Like the groupings that we have for students to go to different schools. Is there, in this kind of 10-year window, any of these schools that are projected to exceed their enrollment capacity that we may have to also add some kind of an addition? Because I suspect that's not reflected here fully.
no, at this time, with the addition at Mount Nittany, it appears that you will meet the enrollment needs throughout the district.
It'll be pretty stable. Okay.
With your buildings at this time. So this is more of addressing just maintaining your existing buildings as needed right now.
Okay. And then the one other question that I had, I know that we had discussed probably last year sometime, we had approved new cooling towers in the 3 newer elementary schools. I think like they had to be replaced within a fairly short period of time. Are most of these upgrades that we're doing going to come with warranties just in case those kinds of things happen again? Is that pretty typical?
Typically, it's a 1-year warranty.
A 1-year warranty.
Yeah,
okay.
that's pretty typical.
Okay. All right.
You don't get anything better than we, the consumer, really much. Well, I would imagine some things, but yeah, go ahead,
Yeah,
Carly.
this is not really a question, it's a comment. It's a lot of work that went through this, and I really appreciate it. It's well laid out. And I like the fact that you said that to prioritize, because there were some things like the water heater, I forget which school it was, like to get an extra one for backup. And I'm thinking, well, if the first one is working fine, we could prioritize the things that really needs to be fixed before we start considering backup. So I really like the fact, because I was going to say, how are you going to address these problems, these issues? And I'm glad that you said you prioritize them, because I think some things here, because some of the things were sticker shock when I was looking at the prices. So I'm glad that we are going to prioritize the most urgent needs first and then worry about the extras. So thank you.
So just generally, we look at safety and security as kind of a top priority. And then it's keeping kids comfortable, keeping kids fed, and between a temperature of 68 and 72 with the relative humidity between 40 and 60, right? And then third is kind of
First half, too.
aesthetics, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Jump on to Park Forest.
Yeah.
Stick around.
We're gonna roll right into Park Forest.
I
So
think-
just a quick memo, like I said, just outlining that we had the community forum on June 2nd. And good discussion with the group. You know, there was kind of a few topics that came up there. And just wanted to note that, you know, since then, we have had another meeting with our civil engineer. They're finalizing the traffic study. So, you know, our hopes are that we can get a light somewhere in that vicinity. As well as, you know, there's been back and forth for interior classroom windows in the new Park Forest Middle. And I think as of right now, the guidance we're getting from our SROs is that we're leaning towards taking them out currently. So I don't know if it might still be a discussion point, but I think that's the direction right now. We're leaning under the guidance of our SROs.
So Mike, is that, yeah, so you're specifically talking about, so similarly like Spring Creek, we had talked about the banks of windows along the wall in the hallway. So those would be potentially eliminated.
That's what currently we're looking at, yes.
Okay, and I think it's just important to call attention to that because it's a change from our last major building projects. That was not at that time.
Right, and this has come up, like I said, through our meetings, through our SROs and security team is what the push is right now.
Okay.
We might have some follow-up meetings to that effect.
Okay. Yeah, I guess I would be interested at some point to hear a little more about the why.
Yes.
Yeah, which I would guess, yeah. Was there more to that than Jackie? Go ahead, Debbie.
I was just going to say, I would be also interested in hearing about the why, but also, right, we have a few classrooms that don't have an exterior window.
That was my next follow-up.
So I thought part of how we were bringing light into those was if they had an interior window, but there was light across the hallway or something. So we just need to make sure that we're bringing it down from the ceiling, right? So that we have natural light in all the rooms, because that was a big goal.
I think the takeaway is in any project, and we saw it through the elementaries and the high school, it's not always a straight line from the start to the end. So that's probably one thing that we need to discuss, and we'll have some follow-up meetings, just like some of the departments, you know, some of the departments we met with 2 or 3 times, and there are departments that we still have 1 or 2 more meetings. You know, we'll probably be out to 5 meetings plus with some of the groups that just require some more detail.
Okay.
So.
Yeah, I was going to ask that similar question as that, how would we, if we gave that up, how would we overcome it? And I guess this is not a question to be answered tonight, but as we get to that, I guess it would help me better the part of the why, how that might relate to the size or location of windows. You know, I think a transom kinds of high up things that might be less of a ability for someone to go. Anyway, all those things I know you're talking about, but those are just things that would be helpful to better understand. Because I know it's been a big goal for us to, have that daylighting in there. So,
Okay.
Others? Okay. Thanks for the heads up that would be coming, and I appreciate. And we'll all go home and cross our fingers and say a little prayer or whatever you do for our traffic lights lights that we'd like to have.
Yeah, are we hoping for 1 or 2? Can you not say?
Well, I don't want to.
Depends on who you ask, I think.
Fair enough.
Yeah, I would certainly hope for at least 1.
Okay.
All right. Thanks very much, Jeff, for
Thank you.
joining us in
Have a
person
great evening.
tonight. And I think if we're done with all that, then we can move on to community field tennis court lights. Mike, you were going to give us some information about a potential lighting upgrade there
Sure.
at community field?
Sure. Working with the USTA, there are some grant opportunities. So I met with our field lighting vendor, Musco. I mean, all of our fields are Musco's. It's the same platform then. We can control them from computer or phone, you know, if something happens. We were going to have to do some work up there this summer anyways, rent a lift and replace a bunch of the heads, just because some of them are out. And the heads that we replace with, you know, the light tends to kind of travel out a little bit further than we'd like. It's not as focused as we'd like. So Musco makes a product that would actually focus that light more. So we actually think that it would be better for the community as well. And so we figured it was going to be somewhere around $20,000 this summer to be able to address what we needed to address internally. And then our cost estimate came back at originally about $90,000. However, I just received an updated quote at $75,000. So the USDA right now will apply for the grant. It's a 50% matching grant, and then there's like a local chapter that'll throw in an extra 10 on top. So it's pretty comparable to what it would cost us to do the work internally, and we would have a much better product. So just kind of giving you a heads up. It's something that came up. It kind of came across my desk, and we dug into it, and we're looking at doing it. So.
That's great. We always like to get more bang for our buck, and I'm sure the individuals that live right there would be appreciative as well. So, any questions about that for Mike? Great. Okay, then I think we're going to move on to policies. I think Michelle Simpson's going to join us for a couple of these policy updates. Looks like we have 3 for this evening. Searches, metal detectors, and suicide awareness, prevention, and response.
Microphone's working? Yes, good. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
So as you can see, I have the resident experts with me tonight. Stephanie Beaver, our Student Services Director, and Officer Matt Hertline. And the policies that we have for information and discussion tonight, the first one is Policy 226, which is searches. That is a new policy, and it provides comprehensive guidance on standards for searches of students' persons and other belongings based upon reasonable suspicion, as well as random or general searches that are not based on individualized reasonable suspicion but are justified by the compelling interest in protecting the school community. The comprehensive nature of the policy also addresses various related issues, including locker inspections and searches, as well as handling and disposal of items found in the course of a search. The language regarding electronic devices emphasizes, as we also do in Policy 81511, that a reasonable suspicion standard must be present to examine the contents of a device. So we will open that up for any questions anyone has or comments.
Anybody? I appreciate this. I know this in part, I think it was probably on your agenda anyway, but after our credible threat, we've talked a little bit about how do we handle things, and so it's important that we have kind of all these things spelled out and pretty clear for our community about how they're going to be handled. So I thought this was really thorough and complete. Any other board member questions? I thought it was really helpful. I appreciate your referencing the electronic searches as well and how that they go together. That's, I think, important too. All right. So if there's no problems or concerns with this, we would bring it back at a future meeting for consent agenda for voting.
Okay, great. Moving on to 701 or 7091, use of metal detectors. This is a new policy, and since PSBA does not maintain a policy on this topic, the draft was developed based on compiled research, including some examples from PSBA. The policy is specific to the authorization of handheld and or walk-through metal detectors for individuals entering buildings, boarding or riding school buses, entering school property, attending school events on school property, and attending school activities that may occur off-site. The superintendent may authorize use when there is reasonable suspicion that one of these 3 conditions are present. It would be either reliable information or observation that weapons or dangerous objects are in the possession of an identified or unidentified student or individual. Or 2, there is a pattern of weapons or dangerous objects found at the school, on property, or at school functions, or in the vicinity of a district facility. Or 3, violence involving weapons has occurred at the school, on school property, or functions, or in the vicinity of a district facility. The policy also addresses implementation procedures, communication, and the handling and disposing of items. So if you have any questions on that or comments.
Board members? I had one. When we use the term walk-through metal detector, does that not necessarily specifically just mean the portable ones we've bought? Like, it would be any kind of walkthrough, is that, or does it kind of qualify a certain type of walkthrough?
Any walk-through metal detector would be the ones, I mean, mainly the ones we use around here are the portable ones, just like Penn State, like they let us borrow. So any portable walk-through metal detector are pretty much the same. I know some districts have them kind of built into the door frame. You can go that route too.
Okay.
But these ones being portable, especially with how many schools we have in the district, I mean, it's a great resource to have. And I want to thank Dr. Bruker and the board for getting more so we don't have to go back to Penn State in case, God forbid, we'd ever need them again. But
Yeah.
it's just great it's a good resource to be there.
Yeah, I think portable makes a lot of sense for us. I just was curious if we ever did decide to install something, they would still be covered in this policy, which it sounds like you're saying they would be. Not that I'm looking to do that, for flexibility of the policy. Well, if there aren't any other questions, I had one that just occurred to me. It didn't occur to me when I read through it before. A lot of our reference in the policy is about informing students and walking students through the process, but that doesn't necessarily prohibit us from using it. I mean, we talk about using it for an event, which obviously would be more about the public potentially, like if we had a performance event, an athletic event, something that we had a reason that we wanted to use them. And it just occurred to me as you were talking and I was skimming through whether we needed any language about how we inform the public if they're going to be going through that. Because it kind of the implementation part, it all refers to students will be told. I mean, it kind of tells you what happens if it goes off. So I don't know that we really need it, but it just, as I kept seeing students as I scrolled through it, just kind of popped into my head whether there's any reason that we would want to have any kind of clause that calls attention to the fact that we would treat public members of the community similarly should they be subject to using the detectors coming into one of our buildings. So it's just something to think about. I don't know that it's kind of a little bit over and beyond, but it's at least highly specific in case someone's a little bit not certain. Just a thought. Just so it's clear that it's not just our students, it could be someone else. Yeah, Aaron?
Just kind of looking at the policy and thinking about who has authority to use and to make the decision to use this. Do we give our SROs sort of the freedom to make that decision in the moment, or that has to come from administration?
It's from administration. And even when we utilize the metal detectors, I actually don't, like, we can't stand there and I can't go through the students' bags, and that's just part of the search policy. Administrators and whoever's trained to do so can do that, like standing sense security and everything. Because I'm held at police officers are held at more of a higher standard when we can actually search someone when they're coming through. So even at Penn State football games, we always kind of stand in the background.
Yeah.
So the event staff will search, and if they find something, then we can get involved at that point if they find something.
I see.
It's a little subtle, but yeah, I caught that in the search policy. It delineates when it's an administrator has a little more latitude, whereas a police officer has to have a higher level of suspicion in order to do
for
it.
legal reasons.
Yeah.
Yep.
Where are we keeping our portable metal detectors? Like, where are they stored?
Combination of the high school and here at PV.
Okay, so like half and half or something like that.
I can check.
Okay, it doesn't really matter. I'm just curious.
The campus at the high school's the most likely because of Delta and location of the high school and the number of students, so.
Makes sense. Other questions? I know this was kind of, I don't want to say fast track because I don't want to allude that it wasn't well taken care of, but I know this was a priority for you guys to get through and have all this information updated. So I'm really impressed. It's very thorough. I really appreciate the level of detail that's provided to make sure everything's clear to our students and our families of, what the parameters are. Any other questions from board members? Okay, then this would be one we could potentially bring back as well. Yeah.
Okay, sure. Yeah, there was a collaborative effort since it was not PSBA did not have a policy on it, so it took a lot of research, and Jeannie did a lot of gathering of that information and putting things together, along with a team of people who gave her input to construct it. So, yeah, you're right. It was a lot of work.
Yep.
But we're happy to have it.
Yeah.
Okay,
I
so we're
think-
good to move that one forward. Okay, 819, suicide awareness, prevention, and response. So this is a heavily revised policy from 2016, and PSBA recommended replacement of the existing policy with a revised version, which has been written in accordance with consultation of Penn State Medical Group, the Pennsylvania Bureau of Children's Behavioral Health, Allegheny County Student Assistance Program, Western Psychiatric Institute, and Clinic of UPMC. The definitions section has been significantly expanded upon and updated, and expanded professional development opportunities. There are more clearly articulated referral process for students exhibiting warning signs versus referral in the absence of a warning sign, collaboration with the student in the development, revision of a safety plan, post-vention information, coordination with the student's treatment facility. And PSBA recommends including a list of links and contact information with this policy. And the draft policy was also reviewed with multiple stakeholders with expertise in the mental health field, including some of the stakeholders mentioned in Dr. Erbacher's report. So there was significant collaboration on this one as well.
Indeed. Board members, questions? Aaron, go ahead.
I just had one, am I on? Yes. Just one question about the response to suicide, the postvention. I remember discussing this in policy last time, and I remember bringing it up, but I think we came to the conclusion that this was like an administrative regulation or administrative policy that the actual procedures within postvention applied to.
Yes.
Okay.
So we have guidelines, which we are also reviewing as part of the action plan from
Okay.
Dr. Erbacher's report. So while the policy kind of holds us to like what those items should be, our administrative regulations will be embedded within the guidelines. And so that counselors, mental health clinicians, administrators know exactly what to do when
Okay.
these things arise.
And I think one thing I had asked about, and I'm not sure that we came to any conclusion, was whether that could be referenced here. Not necessarily copied wholesale, but just so that people can find it and see it. My concern had been that because we're bringing this up after, in the aftermath of an incident, for the postvention section to be basically a couple sentences, I could see people being concerned about that or just wondering where they can find more information. Or I think it's 11, response to suicide, the postvention, yeah.
So the postvention, which I think references response to a death by suicide, is also in our EOP, like emergency, like protocols, our flight team training, and those kind of items. Our suicide guidelines kind of are the action steps to kind of go through the screening and assessment pieces to determine if a student needs help. So the postvention, I would think, would be in the EOP. I don't know if we post that public, our emergency procedures, no.
Okay. Yeah. I had one question, because I wasn't in the policy committee meeting, so, so it's page 10 of the memo, page 9 of the actual policy. The top of the page, it says response to suicide attempt. And certainly the first several items on the list makes it seem like this is intended to be a section that's response to an attempt like in our buildings or on our campus. Or at least that's an initial impression that I had, because we're talking about rendering first aid, coordination of the threat assessment team. And the reason I asked whether it's qualified in that way is because number 3 of notifying students employees, parents, and guardians. So we've had a discussion in the community as of late about suicide attempts and who gets to know that information. So there's a difference between an attempt that happens in our buildings or on our campus that would be like an emergency event. So certainly there are times we notify students or parents in the community of that building that there's been an incident at their building because their students are present that day and are aware that something has happened that day. However, when we know of a student who has had a suicide attempt, potentially not during the school day, outside of the school day, I'm not aware that we are able to then share that information with students and other parents and guardians. And the way that this section is phrased could lead a person to believe that's the case. And this has been kind of a topic we've. Do you understand what I'm saying?
I understand what you're saying, and I agree. Like, I mean, there's a breach of confidentiality in disclosing that information. But the way I read it is also within the guidelines is that if a student, say they come to you as a counselor, they say, hey, I attempted suicide or I'm thinking about attempting suicide, then that kind of triggers like the screening process where they are and notifying, like notification. So it could be anonymous, like notifying parents and guardians, which also came up in the Dr. Erbacher's report, is that you're making sure that we're making contact.
But it's the students' parents. It's not, like the way this is phrased, it says notifying students, employees, and parents, guardians. To me, this reads as, we're gonna tell a lot of people. Not, we're not gonna reach out to the student who's been reported about, or that, I mean, we don't always tell, we wouldn't tell every teacher in a building. We would only be telling the teachers on that student's roster or on that student's team.
Right.
If there was a safety plan about them. But the way this is phrased, it's not defined which employees, nor is it defined which parent and guardians. So I really do not want to give the impression
I
that
don't think
this
it's
is.
defined which students either.
I agree. Like, this is very, to me, it reads as very ambiguous and needs qualification.
Okay.
So, particularly because this has been a subject of conversation. Yeah, Debbie,
Well, I'm just wondering in response to that,
committee, yeah.
because but I don't remember having this particular conversation, but we had a very thorough
I'm sure.
conversation about a lot of things. Part of what I wanted to say, but I want to go back to replying to you, was, thank you to everyone who went to that, because it was a really great conversation. And especially for those of us who don't have all the vocabulary and haven't worked in this, the expanded definition section is super helpful. And I think super helpful to just general parents who are trying to understand what's going on. But in response to Amy's question, I see your point. I didn't see it before. It's like this section should be titled Response to a Suicide Attempt That Happens in a School Building.
That's what I thought it was referring.
Right,
the whole
and that,
section.
all of this seems very relevant for that. And then do we need to have a separate section to response to a student's suicide attempt that happens away from the building? And to delineate the differences between,
Who knows what?
yeah. So that might be one way to address that. It makes it longer. There's some overlap clearly, but I do sort of echo Amy's concern of who gets notified.
Yeah, I guess I don't read it as it happening within the school setting.
Really? Because it's,
I mean,
it says rendering first aid until professional medical service and transportation
So,
can be achieved.
I mean, it's attempt. It could be a verbal, like, I verbally am thinking about this, or it might, like, indicate attempt, but I don't think always, I guess it is a confusing section that we can go back and review and have discussion about in regards to clear up some language.
I'm not in the field. As a layperson, the word attempt to me would always include action, some sort of action, not just a conversation or expression of consideration.
And
But
this
I'm
could
a
also
layperson.
come, yeah, and this could also come through Safe to Say or other reporting agencies where it may have happened outside of school, but then the report comes and it goes to a person within the school that addresses and does the suicide like Columbia
Correct,
Rating
but
Scales.
in
the
that instance,
assessments,
we would
grading, and
not be
things like that.
notifying other students or,
So,
or the broadest of employees. We would only be anybody who's connected to that student for a safety plan, so. Did you want to add something?
Yeah, even if there's redundancy, I prefer that we have clarity so that
Mm-hmm.
anyone reading it is clear moving
Right.
forward.
Sorry,
We'll take a look at it.
being this is the first I've stopped going to policy meetings in quite a long time, it's kind of actually helpful, I think, for me to see it without the conversation because the conversation doesn't shade how I read it. So maybe that's part of the reason I'm kept calling attention to it. Peter?
Yeah, I'm wondering if there might be a way to qualify the range of behaviors and locations in the sentence that says methods of responses to a range of potential suicidal behavior, or I'm sorry if I'm using language that is
Passe.
right,
Or whatever.
exactly.
Outdated.
I think that there may be qualifying language at the beginning that makes this bundle of potential activities, things that we would respond to, their locations and the appropriateness of a given response, so that you don't even necessarily have to say if it's in the building, if it's not in the building, because professional judgment from the people who work in this will inform the kind of decision tree that follows, and so it could be that way. And maybe it's not.
No, but also just kind of also some more clarification within the context of this section. It says response to suicide attempt or suicide. So I would read that death by suicide, and then how would you respond to those methods? So it's saying suicide attempt or suicide, not necessarily how. So in that section 3, notifying students, employees, and parents and guardians would relate to the communication pieces should one of those events happen, similar to our flight team process and those kind of things. So if I read
But
even
this is
further,
broken down. This is attempt, and then there's response to suicide as the postvention section. So, I don't know, I think, you may want to just look at it a little more closely. The only other comment I had really quickly was just a verb tense issue in the safe to say section. It says, in one of the last sentences, it says limited, and it should be limits or something like that. The verb tense is incorrect, so I just thought I'd let you know. Those were the only ones I had. Other questions from other board members? Yeah, sure. Do you have one more, Aaron? Or
My
two,
light.
or however many?
Tells me if it's working. Yay, okay. I was as a member of policy committee, and obviously Deb and Carleen can voice their, I think this would be worth bringing back, probably maybe at the next policy meeting, just to go over this section at least.
Sure. Yeah, I think if that's helpful to you guys, that can make sense. I mean, we're not in a rush, although we certainly do want to, since this is a big shift and change, we want to get it in moving forward,
Yep.
ideally.
that's fine.
All right. Does that work for you guys? Okay. All right, so we have 2 of the 3 we'll bring forward for our consent agenda, and we'll take a little bit closer look at the section for this one.
Good.
Is that okay?
If any other concerns come up between now and then, let us know.
Absolutely. And yeah, it's a big work, so, I find when we have a big, huge revamp or a brand-new policy and it's this intensive, it's not uncommon for us to sometimes have to sit back and think a little bit and go and relook at some sections on occasion. All right, I think that's everything. Thanks. Thanks
you
very
all.
much for being here.
Yes, thank you.
Officer Hertline. Okay. So that brings us to our last information item. And this is an overview of the process. The board will be discussing the process we potentially will be using at the special meeting on July 1st to fill the seat vacated by Dan Colby. So I'm just going to share a little information from the memo for the public's edification. Hopefully, board members have already reviewed that. But announcements and advertisements have been published this past week, as required, and that's initiating the process for us to accept applications for the position. The position will be held until the municipal election on Tuesday, November 4th, 2025. from Debbie and I in leadership, our suggestion is that rather than consider a down select process that might involve more than one meeting, we propose that the board consider and interview all applicants at the board special meeting on July 1st that we have currently scheduled. We suggest allowing each candidate, to give a 3 to 5 minute presentation for the public, oral only, no slideshows, please. And we would ask them to cover, these are the suggested following topics. And this is similar to what we've used in the past at a recent vacancy we had about a year ago. So the suggestions are that they provide an introduction that includes their background, experience, and connection to SCASD, asking them what prompted them to seek this vacancy. Are there any particular issues or topics that they hope to work on or they have a special interest in? And finally, do they see themselves serving the district beyond this interim role? And that could be in any sort of capacity, There could be clarification or follow-up questions from the board after each candidate presentation. Depending on the number of candidates, ideally we keep this to a reasonable time. 3 to 5 minutes was written down as a suggestion. Regarding the voting process, since sometimes we've used some different approaches, we wanted to be very specific and make sure that everybody is comfortable with this approach. And I did briefly consult with Dr. Etter, our solicitor, about this, and he gave approval for this potential process, but again, this is a suggestion. So the voting process we are proposing is nominations are made and they require a second, and multiple candidates could be nominated. Once all nominations have been made, the floor would be open for discussion amongst board members. In the first round of voting, each board member indicates the candidate for whom they cast their vote, so the individual's name. If a single candidate does not achieve a majority on the first round of voting, then a second round of voting would take place immediately to follow. Again, each board member would indicate the candidate for whom they are casting their vote. If no majority arises after 2 rounds of voting, the candidate with the fewest votes would then be eliminated. If there are 2 candidates with the same vote total at the lowest level, they would both be eliminated. For example, if we had 2 candidates with 1 vote, we would eliminate both of those. The floor would be reopened at that point for discussion prior to the 3rd round of voting, and then a similar procedure could continue if no majority is achieved at that point in time. For the public's information, once that candidate is successfully elected at that meeting, they'll be sworn in by Dr. Etter at the July 21st, 2025 regular board meeting, which will be their first board meeting to attend as a member of the State College Area School District Board of Directors. So I'll open the floor to the rest of the board for comments or questions on the proposed process thus far.
Since I witnessed but was not a part of the last one of these, all the deliberation about candidates once the presentations are done has to be public. That's correct?
Correct. I mean, that was the way we did it previously, and I believe you're correct. I think that's necessary.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
The only piece that I don't have in here that I did have to ask Mr. Etter about, but he is not present this evening, was just at which were the appropriate points to provide for public comment. I'd have to go back and pull the previous meeting, whether we had our typical general public comment at the beginning of the meeting, or whether we will hold it after. I mean, my thought is after we would have some deliberation and before we have the first voting, we would offer an opportunity for public comment. But I'm open to suggestion for that, and I certainly can consult with Scott after he gets back to town before we have this meeting. So that was the one piece I couldn't recall off the top of my head when we had done it before, but I do believe we had public comment at that meeting. So. Go ahead, Debbie.
One point of clarification, just because we don't list it, like Dan will be gone by July 1, so we'll be a sitting board of 8. So then presumably a majority would require 5 votes. If someone were to miss the meeting, because life happens, there'd probably be 7 people in attendance, and then I would assume it would only require 4, or does it require a majority of the whole board?
I did look at the policy, and my reading, it just said majority.
Okay, that's what I was thinking it was, but I know that there are certain things that we need a majority of the full board, whether or not everyone's in attendance, so I thought I would ask. And I didn't have a chance to look.
I can triple check and check with Scott, but that was what I read when I looked it up and is my recollection.
That's what I was thinking it was. Thanks.
So if this is a process the rest of the board members are comfortable with, some of this information is going to be shared in our reply to the application so that they know what the process will be. So that's why it's important that we're all agreed, hopefully for the major tenets of this tonight, so we can let our candidates know what to expect when they come to the meeting.
We don't have access to the applications before that. Is that correct? Like we won't have read anything?
No, we
Oh,
will.
we will.
Yeah,
Okay,
as
okay.
they're just starting to come in, and so once Lynn has them and can share them out with us, she would do that, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, so we'll have time ahead of time to read through them all without being rushed prior to the meeting.
Right.
That's why we have the application process closed in advance of the meeting. So that's not actually, no. So I can explain it. It's very confusing that this is the first time we've had this, well, since I've been here, that it's a temporary position, and then even though the term is longer, it'll be up as a special election in the municipal election. So my understanding is, and tell me if you all have the same experience, the current candidates that have already gone through the primary will be in the standard section for a school board election. And this particular intramural, when it's up for that November election, will be like a special election category. So for people who maybe lived in the borough, this happened recently with Nalani Krishnakudi. She was an interim position, and then it was a special election seat in the follow-up election in November. So it is a little bit wonky to follow, but that's a little bit how it'll should look on your ballot. There'll be their standard section and then a special category to fill this vacancy.
Yeah. And the main distinction is in the recent primary and the upcoming election, we know that there are 4 seats up for 4-year terms. The special election will be to complete the remainder of Dan's term, but since he's done a little over a year, the interim will do a little under, maybe a year and a half. The interim would do about a half a year. And then the special election will be for someone who will complete the remaining 2 years of that term.
Correct.
So that's the difference between the seats.
Yep. So simple, exactly. Clear as mud, right? So we've had this discussion several times to get it all straight in our heads, so understandable if it's a little confusing for others. Okay, so I'm not hearing any objections or concerns, so this is the process we're going to work through, and we'll put together our acknowledgement letter for our applications as they come in, so they're aware of this as well, and we look forward to this discussion for July 1st. Yeah, 1st? Yeah. Yep. Sorry, it's all running together. All right, then that concludes information items. We'll move on to board reports, so board members can share updates on their committee initiatives. Central Intermediate Unit is sometimes Ann, but also Jackie. Ann's not here. Do you have anything to share, Jackie?
Yeah, so I don't have much to share other than our upcoming meeting on June 26th, I believe, will be Dr. Endler's last meeting as the executive director of IU10, after which our new executive director will take over. And so I just wanted to take a second to say thanks, Dr. Endler. She's been a really great executive director, and I'm looking forward to continuing the work on the IU board in our new iteration. So we'll see how it goes.
I'll second that. She will be missed. SCASD Education Foundation, we don't have anything to report there. How about CTC Local Advisory Committee? Carlene or Aaron, anything recent?
Oh, it is on. Good. So I'm just going to test it this time. So we did have a meeting on the 5th of June, really to review our year, but also to see how the test results turned out and talk about the Perkins Improvement Plan. So our NOCTI testing results were outstanding as usual. In fact, they were better than they had been the year prior. I think we had a pass rate of 96.1%.
Wow.
which is impressive by itself. We talked a lot about grant funding. We continue to bring in a number of different subsidies and donations. The Auto Tech program gets cars donated, and they're able to use those for quite a while. The one thing we did discuss was the Perkins Improvement Letter. So the state essentially gives us a target for things like students, the percentage passing like the Keystone exams, as well as the percentage of students that we have in non-traditional concentrations. So the goal of that being, for instance, we want to see more female students in engineering. So how do you recruit in that way? So we had a conversation about how we always seem to have to be put on an improvement plan because it is you're expected to grow based on your prior year and your prior levels. They give each district its own level. So we kind of hit a ceiling effect. So it's kind of difficult for us to do that. But despite that, Ben and the whole CTC team takes the process very seriously, and we do continue to see improvement, even though it's hard to meet the goals that they keep setting for us higher and higher every year.
Yeah, when I remember learning about the ceiling effect as a new board member, and that we experienced that a couple places in our district, which is a good problem to have, but also kind of it's a little not intuitive for you to understand.
When you talk about like the Keystone for algebra, for instance, the things we have discussed is like, so you're basically being judged on whether or not the students are meeting something that other people are teaching, essentially.
Yeah.
But despite that, they actually have a paraprofessional that they've added to work with students individually to enhance their math scores. So they are taking it seriously.
Of course. Yeah, that's great. Thanks. That's helpful information and positive feedback. We can move on to Citizens Advisory Committee Athletics.
I missed the meeting accidentally in May, but we have another one coming up in August. But from what I could say from the agenda, a lot of it was how well we did in the spring season that our student representative told us about. So that was basically the gist of it. But we do have a meeting coming up August 11th.
Okay, yeah, a lot of impressive performance this spring. I don't think we've had a facilities CAC that I'm aware of. And finance, I don't think as well, because we've passed the budget, so we get to take a breather. School health and safety is Ann or Gretchen. Gretchen, do you know if they've had a meeting? Okay. Last time, technology. Aaron will have to be all of you. Anything from the technology CAC? Okay. All right. Before we conclude our agenda and move on to future meetings, I know that Jonathan already thanked. Did you have a question about? Okay, we can do that. All right, why don't you do that first?
All right, so this is for... It's on. All right. This is about the solar power purchase agreement. So I wasn't here because Mayor Naines asked me to come and be present during the report to the Borough Council about the SPPA. And this is a larger report than we have had in a while. So all 10 organizations have signed the PPA as of today at 5:03 p.m. The documents were all sent to Green Sky so that they can then be signed by Direct Energy and Prospect 14. As you know, this has taken quite a while, and I cannot tell you the amount of tension that left my body knowing that those documents are finished. Yeah. So just so that people know, the project, there's an unfortunate amount of disinformation being peddled by some people. And so I just want to clear up any misunderstandings because gossip sucks. I'm just going to say that very clearly. I don't appreciate gossip about this project when you could just come and ask me some questions and maybe I would sit down and answer them. But some people choose to believe in fantasies and fictions instead of dealing with facts. So I'm going to give you some facts. The solar project is named CL Route 58. It is 13.51 megawatts of AC. in Sligo, Pennsylvania, Clarion County. It will be built on reclaimed strip mine land. I think that's pretty great. Clarion County, much of Clarion County has a lower per capita income than we do. So for those people who were caterwauling about us building a solar project on farmland in Center County can now realize that there is a solar farm being built on strip mine land in an area where economic development may be more needed than ours. I would have been very happy to have it here. I think many of us would have, but it's not. And guess what? It costs the same. It is in the PJMQ as AF 1-167. So people calling this a, quote, mirage, you're full of it. It is listed as suspended, and it can be seen by Green Sky. I have screenshots if anybody wants them. Facts, not fiction. Once the developer has the PPA documents, those are called power purchase agreement documents. Once those are signed, it becomes unsuspended. So, facts. There's a land development plan. Guess what? It was approved a while ago. Unlike some people, we like to deal with facts about this land development plan. The construction permit is easy to get and will be secured. Once the project developer has control of the project, they will be able to move it ahead, and all groups will receive construction updates. It is anticipated that the commercial operation date will be achieved by October 31st, 2026. Guess what happens if they don't do that? The developer has to pay us. So I say this in a pretty sarcastic tone of voice because I am personally tired of people lying about this project. And if you have any questions about it, you could just come and ask the people who are most connected to the project to answer those questions in a straightforward fashion instead of peddling misinformation and disinformation and assassinating the characters of people who have worked on this project for over 5 years. I want to say I really don't appreciate certain people deciding that it is their job to assassinate the characters of people who are in paid positions for our municipalities, our county, and our school district. They work really, really hard. They work really, really hard so that taxpayers can save money, so that we can take action on climate change. And it incenses me that people would go after people for doing the right thing, many of whom are volunteers. And people who attack them should be ashamed of themselves. Absolutely ashamed of themselves. I am so proud of the people who did this. I really am. And I know I'm very passionate right now. My ears have probably turned red, and I'm a little irritated. But at the end of the day, it's because this project matters to people who put it together, and I am so proud of them. I want to thank Joe Vigilone, who was the first person I talked to about this project. I remember the conversation that we had. We are at the end, and even if I'm like amped up, because that's just how I am, I'm so grateful for every person who played a constructive role in it. It is really awesome. And I just want to thank each of you for being a part of it. And you, and you, and you, and you. Okay? Because really it's for us. Thank you.
Thanks, Peter. I guess I would add one thing. When people have questions about their local government's decision-making or something going on in their local government, we hold public meetings, and all of us are required to hold public comment. And that's an opportunity for anyone in the public to come to a public meeting of any municipal or other governmental agency and ask questions. Now, while public comment isn't time for a dialogue, and we won't answer those questions during the public comment section, That doesn't mean we ignore questions when they come to us at public comment. We routinely have either administrators, staff members, or board members, whomever is most appropriate, reply to those questions and comments. And so when people want to know information, perhaps like if they're a real reporter, they actually contact organizations, or as a community member, they come to a meeting and ask a question or email an organization. But posing questions into the ether and not getting a response is not an equivalent to people hiding things or anyway, other stuff.
Or accusing those people of perjury.
So if you have questions, then ask them to the appropriate, pertinent people, and most often you will get answers. And I will reiterate that as an elected official, more than happy to take questions, guff, concerns, whatever. I've put myself in this seat. I'm willing to take it from the community. But I do not accept that our local civil servants be treated in a manner that they do not deserve. Correct. And that's all I'll say about that. So before we leave, while we're pontificating, I know Dr. Bucher already said thank you and goodbye to Dan, but I'm going to more casually say you will be missed. I enjoyed running for office with you. I've enjoyed your company, and I've enjoyed your astute questions and concerns and the way that you care about both our teachers and all of our students. So Chicago will be lucky to have you and your family, and we will be at a loss, but we wish you all the best. Okay. All right, so now we really are going to conclude our agenda for the evening. Looking ahead to future meetings, we have the special board meeting July 1st to appoint the vacancy seat. That's at 7 p.m. July 15th, we will have a policy development committee. That's at 1:30 in the afternoon here in Panorama Village Boardroom. And our regular board meeting will be held July 21st at 7 p.m. at Panorama Village Boardroom. So that's just a note, we have our special meeting in July, and then we only have one typical board meeting in July due to a lot of vacations and absences, and then we'll start back up to twice a month in August. And with that, I'd like to adjourn the meeting of the State College Area School District Board of Directors. Thanks, and have a good evening, everyone.